What does he have in mind that he wants to accomplish that make being on the board not the best way to accomplish those things?
Well, it may not be one thing, Joe. When you go on the board of directors of a company, your degrees of freedom as an investor are substantially restricted. To put a fine point on it, you're in it for the long haul, and you're in it along with your other directors and officers, and that does restrict your freedom to operate. That's I would say the overly simplistic but practical way to say.
He's been on boards before, so he knew all this.
Well, that is something that you talk about with your advisors and the like, and I assume every situation is different, but that is a substantial consideration before you go on the board of directors. And look, there's also trading information. When you're on the board of directors of a company, you're privy to confidential information that is material and market moving. That can also restrict your ability to move in and out of a stock or other security.
Hey, Jay, a lot of speculation now about whether he takes his ball and goes home effectively selling his shares, or whether this is just the beginning of a larger drama in which he would try to take control of the company. We've already talked about the fact that there's a number of people, including Elon from Silver Lake, on that board. If he were to want to pursue a hostile bid or some kind of bid for the company in conjunction with people related to the board, could he do that without disclosure? At what point would disclosure of any kind of conversation have to happen? And similarly, in terms of him selling his shares or buying more shares, what's the disclosure requirement there?
Look, he's now on a Schedule 13D that was filed. So when you're on a Schedule 13D, you have significant disclosure obligations around these issues, like seeking to take control of a company, adding additional shares, and the like. So not as rigorous as if he was on the board, but still fairly rigorous disclosure obligations.
Does that mean it's still doable, or does that mean it makes effectively pursuing something like this impossible?
Well, I think what I'm saying, Andrew, is that pursuing any type of strategic transaction like that while you're on a 13D is going to require a degree of transparency that would not be the case otherwise. But that's where things are today. We will see how this evolves.
Related to that, by the way, last week he went from being a passive to an active investor. There are some people who have made the argument that during that period that he had effectively misfiled, that he could arguably owe $11 a share, if not more, to every shareholder during that period that he was buying that up. Do you think the SEC should be either investigating or bringing a case related to that?
Here's what I think about that, Andrew. It's again a pretty practical response. That issue is going to play out. That has happened. Whether he was late with his 13D, and if so, what the appropriate remedy is. It's pretty clear to me that that's going to play out over the next couple of months.
When you say play out, you mean the SEC is going to investigate?
I have no doubt that regulators are looking at this. I have no special information, but it's the kind of thing that you would at least take a look at.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.